Hello, and welcome to None of the Above. My name is Steve Nemerovski, and I'm your host. None of the Above was a political program, and we try to examine how the political system became so dysfunctional and polarized. And on every show, we try and talk about solutions to break the cycle of dysfunction and polarization. I'm really excited about today's interview because there's a topic I've been warming up to, and now I'm way past warm. I'm kind of red hot on, and it's ranked choice voting. One of the questions I get asked all the time when I'm out speaking, particularly when I'm advocating for third-party and third-party candidates, is, isn't this a spoiler vote? Aren't we the spoilers? Well, ranked choice voting actually says no, you're not the spoilers. What ranked choice voting does, and we're going to learn much more about it in our interview today with Kyle Bailey, what ranked choice voting does, it allows you to vote for literally the person you think is the best. Third party, established party, doesn't matter. But you know when you make your vote that you also then signal who your second choice is and your third choice is, and it all gets aggregated. So again, Kyle rather is going to walk us through all this, but it's a system that doesn't have spoiler votes and clearly lets you pick who you think would be the best candidate without this notion of spoiler vote. So it's called ranked choice voting, and our interview is going to be with Kyle Bailey. He's a campaign manager for an effort from the state of Maine that was dealing in trying to pass a referendum to create the ranked choice voting in Maine. As you know, one of the things we try to do on every show for None of the Above is provide solutions for how we're going to break the cycle of dysfunction and polarization. And one of the solution sets we visited a few years ago, we had a great interview with Chris Novoselic from Fair Vote. We were talking about a concept called ranked choice voting. Well, ranked choice voting is in my mind, as the more I study it, a really terrific solution that I hope we can get in all states and really across the country. And the fact of the matter is, it now won in Maine. There was a terrific effort, campaign effort in the last election cycle and in the election in November through the effort of the Committee for Ranked Choice Voting. We now have a ranked choice voting victory in the state of Maine. So we're going to talk today to Kyle Bailey, who is a campaign manager for that effort. Learn more about ranked choice voting, because again, it's been a while since we talked about it, but it's a very hot topic in politics, and I think it's something you're going to find on your doorstep, hopefully in the next few years. So, Kyle, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you.
And congratulations on a great victory.
Thank you.
So I told you for the show today, I want to do some educating first to talk, if my viewers can understand what ranked choice voting is, and then we'll talk a little bit more how you won this campaign.
Sure.
And today we're doing an experiment with Grassroots. We're actually live streaming this. I haven't done that before, so hopefully you and I will just be in sync here, and we on a roll, and we'll look great on Facebook too. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Okay. So you were the campaign manager for this effort.
Yes.
And it was a true political campaign, correct?
It was a scrappy grassroots, true political campaign.
Well, congratulations on your victory. So as I said, let's back up first and talk about what is ranked choice voting, why is it important, why do we want it?
So it's a great question. The need was really felt here in the state of Maine going back for about 40 years of elections. So when you have two candidates running, say a Democrat and a Republican, the way we've been electing people first past the post works okay. Someone's going to get a majority, right? 50% of the vote plus one, a majority and wins. So even if it's not your favorite candidate, you know that a majority of your friends and neighbors want to go in that direction. But suddenly when you get a third candidate, or you get 4 or 5 candidates running an election, someone can win with 35% of the vote or 40% of the vote. Less than a majority with first past the post, the way we've elected people in Maine for a long time and the way that most states elect their officials. And not only can someone win with less than a majority, but someone can win who's actually opposed by a majority of voters because of vote splitting among like-minded candidates and voters. And we've had this experience in the state of Maine going back to 1974 when Jim Longley was elected Maine's first independent governor. We've had competitive 3-way, 4-way, 5-way races for governor state for 40 years, but also for U.S. Senate. We're one of 2 states with an independent United States Senator Angus King, who's actually up for re-election in 2018. That will likely be a race with 3 or 4 or 5 candidates. And for the state legislature, we've consistently had independent and third-party candidates in the House and Senate going back at least 20 years. So Mainers like having choices. The problem is the first past the post ballot which we've used up till this point, really doesn't give you the freedom to express your true preferences about the candidates. Because what we found in 9 of the last 11 elections in which the candidate who won received less than a majority was voters needed to think strategically about voting, how they were going to vote based on polls for a lesser of two evils, if you will, in order to stop their least favorite candidate from winning. So conversations in elections stopped becoming about issues and really started to becoming about, what do the polls say? I don't want to waste my vote. Who's the candidate I really don't like, and how do I stop them? So with ranked choice voting, that vote splitting phenomena goes away. The strategic voting phenomena goes away. You can actually vote for the candidate you like the best as your first choice and have a second choice. So if your favorite candidate can't win, there are one or more rounds of instant runoffs to narrow down the field of candidates and to elect a consensus candidate with a majority who's more broadly supported by the people. And there's a clear process to kind of handle more choice and in the process give more voice to voters in our democracy.
So one thing you accomplish is in every election, there is a winner based upon a majority vote. So someone has to get at least more than 50% of the vote, correct?
In the final round of tabulation, someone will always get a majority of votes cast.
And one thing I like about it, obviously you don't watch my show. Maybe you watch my show in Maine, but probably not. I'm a big proponent of the need for third-party candidates. And what a lot of people say is you can't vote for them. It's a spoiler vote. You're ruining the election.
Sure.
This, as you said, this allows someone to vote for the person that they think is, in fact, the best choice without having to worry about the spoiler label, correct?
Absolutely. It levels the playing field for independent and third-party candidates. So you can run, be in the debate, raise the issues. If you can get enough first-choice rankings and in a crowded race, second and third-choice rankings to win, put together a majority coalition, you can win. But even if you aren't successful, you're not a so-called spoiler. You're not having a negative impact in any way in the election, and you're really helping to hold the big parties accountable. And so what we did in Maine was not only level the playing field in general election, but we also applied ranked choice voting to the primaries. So in a crowded Democratic primary for governor or a crowded Republican primary for U.S. Senate, party voters will have a ranked ballot to make sure that they're putting forward candidates who represent the broad number of Democrats and broad number of Republicans who are voting in those primaries, rather than small factions within those parties.
And I think it's really smart that you extended this to the primaries, because with our polarized voting right now, so much of the action is in the primaries these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in the state of Maine, where we have commonly have independent candidates, not just for governor, but for a number of legislative races, because of redistricting and other factors, roughly 70% of elections in the state of Maine are decided in the primaries. So whoever gets the Democratic nomination, or whoever gets the Republican nomination in most legislative races is almost guaranteed to win the general election. And that number is actually a lot higher in a lot of other states that don't have the competitive third parties and independent candidates that we have here in the state of Maine.
So if someone goes in the ballot box, let's say there's 5 candidates. Do they literally put them in order and say, I like candidate 1, then candidate 2, 3, 4, 5? They rank all 5 of them when they vote, or how do they do that?
So in the state of Maine, under our initiative, you can rank up to 5 candidates. So you've got candidate A, B, C, and D and E before you, right? And you can say, you know what, I really like candidate C. I think they're great. They share my values. I think they do a phenomenal job. So I go over to candidate C and I make them my first choice. I fill a little oval right on our ballot next to their name. And then you say, okay, there's 4 other candidates running. If candidate C isn't the consensus candidate and isn't, gets eliminated early on in the rounds of instant runoff because they don't have enough support, I kind of like candidate E. I think they do a good job, so I go down to candidate E and I make them my second choice, and so on, right? I can rank as many or as few as I like. So on election night, the election administrators tabulate all the ballots for first round choices to see who's everybody's favorite candidate. Who do you like the best? So on election night, first round, my vote counts for candidate C, the candidate I like the best. But let's say, in a 5-way race, no one has a majority. So the candidate in last place is eliminated. And let's say that candidate C, my favorite candidate's eliminated. So rather than feeling like my vote is wasted, I get a chance to participate in an instant runoff between the remaining 4 candidates, where my ballot is literally picked up and moved to the pile for my second choice, which is candidate E. Now, those voters who like one of the other candidates who remains in that instant runoff their vote continues to count for their first choice because their first choice is still in the running. So it's simply a process of elimination, round by round, one candidate at a time to narrow down the field until someone emerges as the consensus candidate who's more broadly supported by voters.
Now, this is called instant runoff voting. Is it, in fact, instant? So, in other words, let's say you have these 5 candidates and no one gets more than 50%. Does the computer literally just keep going and going and going and spit out one winner, or does the computer kick out an election result for the first round, everybody studies it, and maybe 2 hours later they all agree now we have to go to another round? How does the timing work on that?
It's a good question. In the state of Maine, the infrastructure is considered to be not quite there yet in terms of actually making it instant, although you certainly could upgrade the systems and technologies to have it be actually instant, where you feed the data in from individual precincts, it gets compiled in the Secretary of State's office, and very quickly. It's more automatic runoff in our case, where it might take a few days to do the tabulation process when you need an additional round of tabulation to narrow down the winners. But I wouldn't be surprised that we see in the very near future, as more and more places adopt ranked choice voting and the election tabulator companies and other software companies start to be more competitive, that you will see very quickly automatic runoffs become instant runoffs, where you really actually can have the election result pretty quickly.
Now, one of the theories of ranked choice voting, and I don't know if it has in fact played out, because it does exist in some jurisdictions, correct, already?
Oh, absolutely. There's about a dozen cities across the United States that use ranked choice voting, including the city of Portland, Maine.
In fact, I don't know if you know this, I'm filming this in Aspen, Colorado right now. We had ranked choice voting and surrendered it. I think we did it for one election cycle, and for some reason the whole thing blew up and we didn't have it anymore. But I find it compelling, and I'm glad you're having it there. But what I was trying to get at, in these other jurisdictions, part of the theory is we don't have to have this negative campaigning. It can have more of a positive tone. Is that what you believe to be the case?
Absolutely, and we've seen story after story of municipalities across the United States that have ranked choice voting. I'll just give you one example. In the city of Portland, voters adopted ranked choice voting in 2010. It was used for the first time in the 2011 mayoral election. There were 15 candidates running that election. So thank goodness we had ranked choice voting, because with first past the post, the old system, somebody probably would have won with 25% of the vote. And you can imagine 75% of voters saying, wait, I didn't vote for that person. How did that happen? So we had ranked choice voting narrow down the field of candidates, but also the leading candidates in that election, the top two in particular, Mike Brennan, the former mayor, and Ethan Strimling, the current mayor, who both lost and won under ranked choice voting systems, also served in the Maine legislature for a number of years, and they won elections under the old system. And they'd say when they were knocking on doors under the old system, if they saw a yard sign for their opponent, they'd skip that door and go to the next one. With ranked choice voting, they couldn't do that. If they saw a lawn sign for one of the mayoral opponents, they went to that door and talked to that voter. Because if they couldn't be their first choice, they wanted to be their second choice. They talked about the issues, tried to find common ground. Say, if I know you like this other candidate, he or she and I agree on these issues, I hope you'll consider making me your second choice. And they knew walking away from that door that if their campaign or their political party or a PAC in support of them dropped a mail piece or a radio ad or a TV ad that crossed the line and negatively attacked their opponents, voters who liked someone else better may be less likely to make them their second choice if their campaign or their friends go negative. And so that's one of the really cool impacts of ranked choice voting, is that you do see, on average, about a 40% decline in negative campaigning in cities that have it. So that's a great thing for the state of Maine, and would be a great thing for our country as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that. And then going back to my third-party candidate theme here, I think it makes a more compelling argument for some of these other candidates to be on the debate stage, right? Because they can say, I can actually win this thing in a ranked choice voting world.
Absolutely. In the state of Maine, it's very common to have the independent third-party candidates on the debate stage, but they may not always get equal time. There may be an automatic way in which they're treated simply as people recognizing that they're a quote-unquote spoiler candidate. So all that goes away. There's no spoiler. You as a voter never have to choose lesser of two evils when there's another candidate you like. You can vote for the candidate you like the best without worrying you'll help to elect the candidate you like the least. And you get a second choice or a third choice in a crowded race if your favorite candidate can't win, and everybody else gets that same opportunity too. So at the end of the day, the candidate who wins is the one who's more broadly supported by the people. And we need more candidates elected who are consensus candidates who can win elections by building coalitions, because that's how they're going to get things done in our city halls and our state legislatures and in our Congress, is having leaders who know how to bring people together and get things done. We've lost that, and ranked choice voting can help us restore that type of government that actually is pragmatic and works through collaboration and consensus.
So you got this great issue. I know Fair Votes pushed it on and on. You had it in Maine at the municipal level. Now you want to get to the state level. How does this campaign come together? What was the impetus for it, and how did you grow the campaign?
Well, I talked a little bit about going back 40 years, the history of elections in our state with more than two candidates, where we had this vote splitting and need for strategic voting issues emerge and really degrade our politics over time. In 2001, the first ranked choice voting bill was introduced in the Maine legislature when Angus King, an independent, was governor, who won his first election with 35% of the vote. In 2007, Republicans introduced ranked choice voting legislation in response to the re-election of the Democratic governor with 39% of the vote in the previous year. And that actually, for the first time, got a significant bipartisan support. And it didn't pass the legislature, but the League of Women Voters of Maine got interested and started studying election reform. They spent 3 years looking at ranked choice voting, actual runoff elections, top two system out of California, a bunch of others, and read research and debated and discussed. And after 3 years, made a consensus endorsement behind ranked choice voting as the best solution for Maine. So out of that endorsement came a working group that drafted legislation, made an effort yet again in 2013 in the legislature. 1/3 of lawmakers co-sponsored ranked choice voting, but it wasn't quite enough to get it through the legislature. And then in 2014, we found ourselves in the midst of yet another gubernatorial election in which the last few weeks of the campaign was entirely about strategic voting. I don't think it was hard to find an advertisement of any kind that had anything to do with the issues. It was really all about, don't waste your vote. Look at what the polls say. And that's really unfortunate, but it was an impetus for us saying, all right, Mainers have experienced this for a long time. They're experiencing it right now. Let's take this issue to the people and let them decide whether or not they want to change the way we elect our leaders. And so at that point, we started collecting signatures. We submitted legislation to the Secretary of State as a citizen initiative for approval. Got approval 10 days before the election. In a week's time, printed petitions, recruited 200 volunteers across the state, and drove boxes of petitions in the middle of a snowstorm up and down the state to get it to people who were volunteering their time on election day to collect signatures. This was a volunteer effort. We didn't have any big donors lined up to give us money. We didn't have the funds to hire a signature collection firm. We just thought it was the right thing to do, and the people responded. And we got roughly 40,000 of the 61,000 signatures we needed to put ranked choice voting on the ballot as an initiative by collecting signatures with volunteers on election day in 2014.
So that's an important thing we've talked about on the show, the use of citizen initiatives, ballot initiatives right now to accomplish something. You did try to get this done in the legislature, didn't work, so you went the citizen initiative route. Was there any challenges? Did it challenge your signatures, whoever they might be that doesn't like this? Or?
Well, our opponents were, I would say, mostly some politicians on both sides of the aisle, and political operatives, special interests who felt threatened by changing the system that they thought they either knew how to play well or were playing well to their advantage. And so, that was an obstacle. We got a lot more opposition at the end of our campaign. A few state legislators came out and worked against us. Our sitting governor, Paul LePage, came out against this and made disparaging comments. But we really started working early on with signatures and then pivoted right to voter education. We talked about 150,000 voters one-on-one about what ranked choice voting is and why it matters. In an election with, between 600,000 and 700,000 people, which is usually where our gubernatorial elections lie, it's a pretty big number of people we were able to actually talk to. And then, of course, did traditional things like TV advertising, some direct mail. We did a bunch of house parties. We had over 150 house parties across a pretty small rural state we had over 30 ranked choice beer elections where people came to a local craft brewery, got a flight of beers, sampled them, tasted them, ranked them. We walked through a demonstration. So we really ran a very grassroots campaign to educate voters about what ranked choice voting was, why it worked, and why it was so important for our state. And I think we got an early start and really rolled up our sleeves and did the work, and that's what pushed us over the finish line, despite opponents' efforts to, raise doubts and concerns about this new thing we were trying to enact.
I like that ranked choice beer voting. That would have had to be popular, right?
Yeah, beer. I mean, people did ranked choice art on their wall. One lady did her flower gardens and had people come and rank which flower beds they liked the best. I mean, people were coming up with all kinds of fun ideas to help educate their friends about how it worked. And most people will walk away from these events as they would from the door-to-door and phone bank saying, this just makes common sense. Why haven't we been doing this before? But it was a new idea for a lot of people, and we knew that early on, and so that's why we got started with voter education, and it worked.
So I always try to help my viewers find solutions. Do you have a sense this can migrate to other states now?
Absolutely. If there are places where voters are frustrated with the political process, which I think is probably everywhere, and are frustrated with their choices in elections, ranked choice voting can level the playing field, allow more voices to participate as candidates in the political process and raise different issues, and give more voice to voters to express their true preferences, and do it in a way that doesn't allow a candidate to win who's opposed by a majority of voters. It makes sure the candidate who wins is the consensus candidate who's more broadly supported. So this opens up the political process for sure. So any place that's interested in opening up the political process to more ideas, new ways of thinking, new voices, this is something you should absolutely consider.
So you still maintain your website. Tell my viewers where they can go to learn more about what you did and how you did it.
Absolutely. So our website is still active. The Committee for Ranked Choice Voting, it's rcvmaine.com. That's RCV as in Ranked Choice Voting, rcvmaine.com. And all the stuff there from our campaign, who endorsed us, a pretty broad coalition of Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, Greens. There's videos from the campaign. There's a detailed, frequently asked questions and answers to those. There's all kinds of stuff. And if that could be a resource for people across the country who are looking for more information, definitely check it out.
Well, Kyle, let me know when you're out in Aspen. We'll do a ranked choice beer voting competition out here. See if we can get this thing going. See if we can get this going in Colorado.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're a terrific guest, and congratulations on an amazing victory.
Thank you very much.
Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed the interview with Kyle Bailey. As I said before the interview, I've gone from lukewarm to just red hot on ranked choice voting. I think it is the answer, not just because I'm a proponent of third parties and third-party candidates, but it just gives an option. It creates an option, and by creating that option, it then allows people to think outside the box and say basically, hey, maybe I can end up with someone who's not a Democrat or a Republican. And in today's elections, there are a lot of people that don't want that Republican or they don't want that Democrat. In fact, there's been a lot of noise about the last general election, and the discussion was, well, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump. Well, the reality, and this is the name of our show, None of the Above got far more votes than either one of them. There was about over 100 million people did not vote. So Clinton got 60-some million, and Trump got 60-some million, and she was ahead of him by 3 million or whatever it was. But the reality is over 100 million, closer to 110 million, basically said, we want none of the above. And you get there with this ranked choice voting. Now, I didn't want to have this spoiler alert before the interview because maybe you wouldn't have watched the interview, but I have to give you a spoiler alert now because unfortunately, the Supreme Court in Maine, after our interview, has ruled that the ranked choice voting election victory is in fact unconstitutional in Maine. Turns out in Maine, and Kyle spoke to this, you don't have to win an election in Maine with a majority of the vote. And the purpose of the ranked choice voting referendum was to create a scenario where you would win by having a majority of the vote, not just a plurality. Well, since the Maine Constitution allows people to win with pluralities, but ranked choice voting forces a majority decision, the court has said this victory is unconstitutional. Now, I don't know what's going to go on with Kyle and his team. I'm sure they may litigate, I don't know. But certainly they're before the legislature right now, and they're trying to create a legislative option that would maybe yield a constitutional amendment or a result that would reinstitute the ranked choice voting victory. But I know that's going to be difficult because on our show we always talk about incumbency protection, and there's a lot of incumbents that don't like ranked choice voting for all the reasons that I do like ranked choice voting. So this will be a very fascinating sequence to follow in Maine. Great victory by Kyle and his team. Great victory for ranked choice voting. I think the word's going to really start getting around now about how important it is and what a great solution it is for all these problems. But unfortunately, a short-term, or hopefully a short-term, loss in Maine. And again, we'll keep you informed as this develops. Remember, if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem.